As the priest said, "Let us pray for the soul of the departed." Sepha stood beside her mother's coffin, her hands trembling. She thought the worst pain was losing the woman who raised her. But then her stepfather, Dammy, cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and smirked. He turned to the mourners and announced coldly, "Before we continue, I think everyone should know. Sepha isn't even her real daughter." The crowd gasped. Sepha's knees went weak. But before she could speak, the family lawyer stood up and said, "Mr. Dammy, maybe you should let me finish what your late wife instructed me to reveal. Because what's written in this letter will change everything." The room fell into dead silence. Sepha stood in front of her mother's coffin, tears running down her face as the priest prayed. Her heart was already heavy with pain, but she tried to stay strong. Then, out of nowhere, her stepfather Dammy cleared his throat and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. He said that Sepha wasn't really his late wife's daughter, and had no right to anything she left behind. The crowd gasped. Some people turned to look at Sepha with shock and pity. Others began whispering. Her stepsister Lami crossed her arms and smiled like she had been waiting for this moment. Sepha's whole body froze. The words hit her like a knife. She couldn't believe the man who had lived with her and her mother for years could humiliate her like this, especially at a funeral. Her chest tightened, her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she struggled to breathe. She wanted to say something, to defend herself, but her voice refused to come out. All she could hear were whispers, people wondering if it was true, asking each other how long they had known. Dammy continued talking as if he was giving a speech. He said Sepha was only pretending to be family, and that his wife had wasted her love and money on a stranger. He looked proud, cruel, and confident. Sepha felt small, like the ground beneath her was breaking apart. Her mother's best friend tried to comfort her, but the humiliation was too much to bear. Then the family lawyer stood up from his seat at the front. He looked calm but serious. In his hand was a sealed brown envelope with Sepha's mother's name on it. He said softly, "Mr. Dammy, before you continue, your wife left this to be read exactly at this moment." The room suddenly went silent. Even Dammy looked nervous, though he tried to hide it. The lawyer broke the seal carefully and pulled out a handwritten letter. He said Sepha's mother had predicted that something like this would happen after her death. The lawyer's voice grew firmer as he said, "Everything she wanted to say will be heard today." Everyone leaned closer, waiting. Sepha stood still, her heart pounding, her hope fighting through her pain. She didn't know what the letter contained, but deep inside, she prayed that her mother had left her truth, something strong enough to silence every cruel word Dammy had spoken. Everyone in the church stared at the lawyer as he unfolded the letter written by Sepha's late mother. His voice was calm but filled with emotion as he began to read. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. "My dearest Sepha," he read, "if you are hearing this, it means I have gone to rest. I know there will be people who will try to hurt you after I am gone, but I want you to remember this. You are not my blood, but you are my chosen child." The whole room went quiet. You could hear people breathing. Sepha covered her mouth with her hand, tears falling fast. The lawyer continued, "You came into my life when I needed love most, and from that moment, you became my daughter in every way that matters. You are kind, hard-working, and pure-hearted, and that is why I have made you the heir to everything I built." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some gasped, some whispered in disbelief, while others nodded softly, remembering how close Sepha and her mother had always been. Dammy's confident smile disappeared. H's face turned pale, and his hands started shaking. "That's a lie," he shouted angrily. "She was never my wife's child. This letter is fake." He tried to grab the letter from the lawyer's hand, but two men stopped him. The lawyer didn't even flinch. He said firmly, "Mr. Dammy, your late wife signed every page of this letter in my presence. And before her death, she made a video recording where she read this exact letter herself." He looked around the room and added, "The hospital, the notary office, and I all verified it. Nothing here is forged." People began to murmur again, this time in Dammy's direction. The same people who had looked at Sepha with pity now looked at Dammy with disgust. The lawyer kept reading the last part of the letter. "To those who doubt, I say this. Sepha was not born from my body, but she was born from my heart. Everything I own, the mansion, the businesses, the savings, belongs to her. No one else." Sepha's legs nearly gave out. She felt a rush of emotions, shock, love, sadness, and relief all at once. Her mother had known this day would come, and had protected her even from the grave. Dammy's voice broke as he shouted again, trying to regain control, but no one listened anymore. Everyone's eyes were now on Sefa, the quiet girl who had just learned that love, not blood, made her a daughter. That night, after everyone left the funeral, Sefa returned home to the mansion that no longer felt like home. The lights were off, and the air inside was cold. Dammy was sitting in the living room, holding a drink, his eyes full of anger. Lami stood beside him, recording something on her phone. When Sefa quietly walked in, Dammy pointed at her suitcase near the door and said coldly, "Pack your things and get out." Sefa froze, confused. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Dammy stood up suddenly, shouting, "You think you can fool me with that fake letter? You are not part of this family. My wife must have been out of her mind leaving everything to you." Sefa's heart started pounding. She tried to stay calm and said, "That letter was from her. The lawyer confirmed everything." But Dammy only laughed bitterly. "Don't you dare talk back to me," he said. "You're nothing but a greedy girl trying to steal what's mine." He threw a photo frame across the room, and it shattered on the floor. Lami began to film Sefa packing, saying in a mocking tone, "Smile for the camera, adopted princess. Let's see what you look like after losing everything." Sefa's hands trembled as she folded her few clothes. "You'll regret this," Lami added with a cruel smirk. "No one will believe you once you're gone." Sefa kept silent, her tears falling one by one. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She picked up her mother's old locket from the nightstand and held it close to her heart. Inside it was a tiny picture of her and her mother smiling together. That was all she needed to remember her strength. As she walked toward the door with her small bag, Dammy said coldly, "Don't come back. You have no home here." Outside, rain began to fall. It soaked her clothes, but she didn't stop walking. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she left behind the house where she had once felt loved. She opened the folder the lawyer had quietly given her before she left the funeral. Inside were a few legal papers and a note from her mother saying, "If they ever turn against you, follow the name I left with Mr. Ade. You'll find your truth there." Sefa looked up at the dark sky, her heart aching but determined. She whispered to herself, "You tried to destroy me, Dammy, but you only woke the fire inside me." With that, she walked into the night, ready to uncover the secret her mother had left behind. Sefa sat in the lawyer's office, her hands clutching the folder tightly. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, but she barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the papers again, but one question kept spinning in her mind. How could Dammy take everything her mother had built? The lawyer, a calm older man named Mr. Ade, noticed her confusion and leaned forward. "Sefa," he said gently, "your mother wasn't just a loving parent. She was also a very smart businesswoman. She owned a chain of wellness centers all over the city. After she passed, Dammy somehow managed to claim them as his own. But that's not the full story." Sefa's eyes widened. How could he do that?" she whispered. Mr. Ade sighed. "That's why your mother left instructions for you. Before she died, she told me, if anything happens to me suddenly, tell Sefa to find Ameo. I didn't know who Ameo was at the time, but now I think it's very important that you find her." Sefa's mind spun. Ameo? She had never heard that name before. She flipped through more papers, searching for a clue. One file contained old newspaper clippings, and her eyes caught a faded article from 24 years ago. It told of a tragic hospital fire where a young woman, a nurse named Ameo, had disappeared. The headline read, "Hospital Fire Claims Young Nurse, Mystery Remains." Sefa felt her breath catch. Could this be the same Ameo her mother had mentioned? Her heart raced as she pieced it together. The adoption records in her folder, the mysterious disappearance, and her mother's insistence that she find Ameo. It was all connected. Mr. Ade watched her carefully, nodding slightly as if he understood her shock. "Sefa," he said softly, "I believe Ameo is your birth mother. Your mother kept this secret to protect you, but she wanted you to know the truth when you were ready." Sefa sat back, her mind spinning with images of her mother working in her wellness centers, her stepfather scheming behind the scenes, and a mother she had never met but had always been a part of her life in ways she hadn't understood. The fire, the disappearance, the hidden adoption. All the pieces began to fit together. She felt a mix of sadness, anger, and determination. Her mother had left a trail for her to follow, and now Sefa knew that finding Ameo was the next step. She clenched her fists, a spark of courage igniting inside her. She whispered to herself, "I will find her. I will know the truth, no matter what it takes." The office felt smaller now, but Sefa felt bigger. Her mother had trusted her with this secret, and for the first time since the funeral, she felt the fire of purpose burning inside her. Sefa marched back to the mansion the next day, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She needed answers from Dami, even if it meant facing his anger. The moment she stepped into the living room, he looked up from his papers and immediately scowled. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "I told you, stay away from things you don't understand." His voice was loud, but there was something behind it, a crack, a hint of fear that made Sefa pause for a second. She held her phone in her hand, quietly turning on the recording without him noticing. "I need answers about Ameo," she said calmly, trying to keep her voice steady. Dami's face darkened, and he leaned forward, his fists clenched. "I said leave it alone," he shouted. But as he spoke, Sefa noticed the hesitation in his eyes. His anger was too strong, almost like a mask to hide panic. Every word, every movement told her that he was hiding something. She stayed quiet, recording every second, letting him expose himself without realizing it. That night, after Dami and Lami had gone to bed, Sefa sneaked into her mother's sewing room. The faint smell of fabric and thread filled the air. There, in the corner, she spotted an old wooden box covered in dust. The lock was rusty, but she managed to open it with a key she found taped under a drawer. Inside, her eyes widened as she saw stacks of documents, folders, and old photographs. Some pictures showed Dami meeting with hospital officials, shaking hands and smiling, but the smiles looked forced in hindsight. There were letters marked confidential, adoption papers, and medical forms. One folder caught her attention. It was labeled DNA results. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The results clearly showed that Dami's wife had not been infertile. She had been pregnant, and the child, Sefa herself, had been taken away from her at birth. Her stomach twisted as the truth sank in. Her mother had known about the theft all along, but she had protected Sefa and kept the secret safe, leaving clues for the right time. Sefa felt a mix of sorrow, anger, and disbelief. She looked back at the photos and papers, realizing that Dami had gone to great lengths to cover up his crimes, faking the adoption, lying to the family, and even controlling the businesses that were rightfully hers. But now, Sefa held the proof in her hands. She whispered to herself, "I finally see the truth. You can't hide anymore." The fear in Dami's eyes earlier replayed in her mind, and she smiled softly, knowing that the power had quietly shifted. For the first time, Sefa felt she was no longer just a victim. She was ready to reclaim everything that was taken from her. Sefa's hands shook as she walked into the small clinic, clutching the DNA papers she had found in her mother's sewing room. The genetic specialist, a kind woman named Dr. Igioma, greeted her and led her to a quiet room. "We'll compare your DNA with the archived hospital records," Dr. Igioma said gently. "It's a routine check, but I think you'll want the truth." Sefa nodded, her throat tight. She had already suspected the truth, but somehow, knowing it was coming made her nervous. The testing took a few hours. Sefa sat in the waiting room, staring at the floor, her mind racing. She thought of Dami, of the lies he had told, and of her mother, who had silently protected her all these years. She felt a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, fear, and a tiny spark of hope. Finally, Dr. Igioma returned with a folder in her hand. "Sefa, the results are clear," she said softly. "You are the biological daughter of your late mother. There is no doubt." Sefa's heart skipped a beat. She felt a rush of relief, but also a sharp sting of betrayal. All those years, Dami had lied to her, claiming she was adopted to steal her mother's fortune. He had conspired with hospital staff to fake documents and make everyone believe she was not her mother's child. Every harsh word, every cruel act, every step he took to humiliate her suddenly made sense. He wanted to control her inheritance, and he thought that by hiding the truth he could keep her powerless. Tears rolled down Sefa's cheeks as the realization sank in. Her mother had known the truth all along. She had kept it hidden, not out of fear or shame, but to protect Sefa until the right moment. Until Sefa was strong enough to face the lies and claim what was hers. Sefa felt a deep wave of gratitude toward her mother. Even in death, her mother had been guiding her, leaving clues, letters, and now proof. Sefa held the DNA report close, her hands trembling, and whispered, "Mama, I understand now. You kept me safe, even when the world lied to me." She felt a newfound strength growing inside her. The anger toward Dammy mixed with determination. She now had undeniable proof that he had manipulated everyone and tried to steal her life. For the first time, Sefa didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a fighter, armed with truth and the courage to confront Dammy and reclaim her life. She left the clinic with her head held high, knowing that nothing could stop her now. The truth was finally in her hands, and she would not let anyone take it away. Sefa sat in her small apartment, staring at her laptop, her hands shaking with excitement and fear. Beside her, Kato, her best friend and a determined journalist, leaned over, ready to help. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked softly. Sefa nodded. "It's time the world knows the truth," she said. Together, they uploaded all the evidence, the DNA report, adoption papers, photos of Dammy meeting with hospital officials, and the documents proving he forged business records. Kato typed a headline that would catch everyone's attention. "Widower stole wife's fortune, lied about daughter's adoption." Within minutes, the post started spreading. Notifications popped up one after another. People were sharing, commenting, and tagging friends. The story went viral in hours. Sefa watched in disbelief as the likes and shares grew into thousands. Messages poured in from people who had known parts of Dammy's schemes, but had never had proof. Some expressed shock, some anger, and some sympathy for Sefa. For the first time, she felt a sense of justice, even before the authorities got involved. The next day, police arrived at the mansion. Officers asked questions, took copies of the documents, and assured Sefa that an official investigation had begun. She felt relief, knowing that Dammy could no longer manipulate the truth. Mr. Ade, her lawyer, confirmed what she already suspected. Dammy had forged several documents after her mother had suffered a stroke. He had illegally transferred ownership of the wellness centers, falsified contracts, and attempted to erase Sefa's rights. The proof in her hands and online now made it impossible for him to escape justice. Meanwhile, Lami, her stepsister, showed up at Sefa's apartment, tears in her eyes. "Please, Sefa, forgive me. I didn't know," she pleaded. But Sefa stayed calm, her expression firm. "I know exactly what you did, Lami. You helped your father cover his lies. You lied, filmed me packing, and tried to humiliate me. There's no excuse." Lami's face fell, her desperation ignored by the community that had already turned against her and Dammy. As the news continued to spread, neighbors, friends, and even strangers started posting about the case, criticizing Dammy and Lami for their cruelty. Shops displayed printed headlines, and the local community meetings were filled with discussions about the injustice Sefa had faced. Sefa watched quietly, feeling the weight of vindication. The power had shifted completely. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just fighting for her inheritance. She was exposing the truth, holding the people who had lied and cheated accountable. The world now knew what Dammy and Lami had done, and Sefa could finally breathe. Justice was no longer a dream. It was happening, right in front of her eyes. The community, the authorities, and even strangers now stood with her, proving that lies can't survive when the truth is strong enough. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with whispers as Sefa sat quietly beside her lawyer, Mr. Ade. Dammy and Lami sat across from her, their faces tense and pale. The judge called the session to order, and Mr. Ade stood, holding a small tablet. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "we have a video recording made by my late client, Sefa's mother, before her death. It confirms the truth about her daughter and the inheritance." The screen flickered to life, and everyone watched silently as Sefa's mother appeared, her face tear-streaked but calm. She spoke with a voice full of love and authority. "If Dammy ever denies Sefa, show him this. I carried her, I birthed her, and I leave everything to her. She is my daughter, in heart and in life, and everything I own belongs to her." The room was silent, except for Sefa's quiet sobs. Even Dammy's confident posture crumbled as he watched the proof he had tried so hard to hide. The judge paused the video, looking at Dammy and Lami sternly. "These declarations are clear and verified," he said. "The court recognizes Sefa as the rightful heir to all assets of her late mother, including the mansion, businesses, and savings. Furthermore, Mr. Dammy is charged with fraud, theft, and falsifying medical records." Dammy's face went pale, his hands shaking. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Lami gasped, realizing she would lose the inheritance she had expected. Sefa felt a mixture of relief and triumph. Years of lies, humiliation, and betrayal had led to this moment, and now the truth had won. The lawyer continued, presenting the adoption papers, DNA reports, and other evidence, all confirming that Dammy had schemed to take control of her mother's property. The courtroom murmured, many shaking their heads in disbelief at the cruelty Dammy and Lami had shown. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Sefa is legally recognized as the sole heir. Mr. Dammy will face all consequences under the law, and Ms. Lami is stripped of any inheritance obtained through deceit. The gavel struck, and a wave of satisfaction washed over Sefa. She didn't just win a legal battle, she had won back her dignity, her mother's honor, and her rightful place in the world. Sefa looked at Dammy, who was being led away by officers, and then at Lami, whose face was full of shame. She felt no hatred, only a quiet strength. She whispered to herself, "Justice isn't just about laws, it's about truth, and truth always finds its way." The courtroom, once filled with tension and doubt, now seemed to breathe with relief. Sefa had finally reclaimed her life, her inheritance, and her moral victory over those who had tried to destroy her. Sefa stepped through the gates of the mansion for the first time since the funeral. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the clouds, giving the house a soft golden glow. She didn't feel anger or bitterness anymore. Instead, there was a calm peace in her heart. Every step she took on the marble floor felt different, lighter, as if the weight of lies and betrayal had finally lifted. She walked slowly through the halls, remembering how her mother had filled each room with laughter, warmth, and love. The memories made her smile through tears, and she whispered softly, "I'm home, Mama." She wandered into her mother's old room, where the familiar scent of lavender lingered faintly. On the dressing table, tucked carefully behind the mirror, was a small envelope she hadn't seen before. With trembling hands, she opened it. The letter inside was written in her mother's familiar, flowing handwriting. It read, "My daughter, when they break you, rebuild stronger. You are my legacy." Sefa felt a lump in her throat. Her mother had known how cruel the world could be, yet she had left her daughter not only with protection and guidance, but also with courage and hope. Tears ran down Sefa's cheeks, but they were tears of strength now, not sorrow. Sefa looked around the mansion, and imagined how it could help others. She thought of all the women she had met through her work, and the people who had suffered betrayal, injustice, and family lies. A determination grew inside her. This house, once a place of grief and manipulation, could become a place of healing and empowerment. She would turn it into a safe space for those who had been hurt, just as her mother had tried to protect her. In the following weeks, Sefa worked tirelessly. She contacted organizations, gathered resources, and set up programs to help women recover from emotional trauma and financial exploitation. Slowly, the mansion transformed. Rooms that had once held pain now held classrooms, therapy spaces, and safe bedrooms. The walls that had witnessed deceit now echoed with laughter and hope. Sefa named the center Ameo's house, honoring the woman who had vanished long ago, her birth mother, and the legacy of love that had been passed down to her. The grand opening day arrived, and women from different walks of life came to see the center. Sefa stood at the entrance, welcoming them with a warm smile. She felt a sense of fulfillment deeper than anything she had experienced before. The mansion, once a symbol of betrayal and cruelty, had been reborn as a place of strength, love, and healing. Looking around, Sefa whispered softly to her mother's memory, "I did it, Mama. I rebuilt, just like you wanted. Your legacy lives on." The house was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who needed a safe place to grow, heal, and reclaim their lives. Months later, the sun shone brightly over the mansion, now transformed into Ameo's house. A crowd had gathered, women, families, and supporters from across the city, all eager to witness the opening of the center. Sefa stood on the small stage at the entrance, calm and poised. She looked out at the faces before her, people who had faced betrayal, injustice, and loss, and felt a deep connection to each of them. Taking a breath, she began to speak, her voice steady and full of meaning. "They tried to erase my name," she said, pausing as the crowd listened intently. "But the truth wrote it again. Family isn't who claims you, it's who protects you when no one else will." The audience erupted into applause, some clapping, others cheering and wiping tears from their eyes. Sepha's words resonated far beyond the walls of the mansion. People shared videos and posts online, and soon her story began trending worldwide under #JusticeForSepha. Messages poured in from strangers praising her courage, inspired by the way she had faced lies, betrayal, and injustice and turned them into strength. Her story became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever been silenced or underestimated. Far away, in a cold prison cell, Dami sat on a narrow cot, watching a news report about Amayo's house. He saw Sepha's speech play on the television, her calm confidence cutting through the lies he had built his life upon. His empire, once his pride, had crumbled, and his lies were exposed to the world. Every cruel word he had spoken, every action he had taken to hurt Sepha, now stood against him. The realization hit hard. He had lost not only his fortune but the respect and fear he had once commanded. Back at the mansion, Sepha stepped down from the stage and walked through the halls of Amayo's house. She paused at the window, looking up at the clear blue sky. A gentle breeze touched her face as she whispered softly, almost to herself, "I kept your promise, Mama. You raised a fighter." The words carried the weight of all she had endured and overcome. She felt her mother's presence in the warmth of the sun, in the laughter of the women around her, and in the life she had rebuilt from the pain and betrayal. Sepha smiled, a mixture of peace and triumph in her eyes. The mansion was no longer a place of loss or cruelty. It was alive with hope, strength, and love. And in that moment, she knew that her mother's legacy was no longer just a memory. It was a living, breathing force, helping countless others rise from their own struggles, just as Sepha had. If you've ever faced betrayal, been underestimated, or had people try to erase your worth, remember Sepha's story. The truth always finds a way, and your strength is your legacy. Share this story with everyone you know. Let Justice for Sepha inspire those who need courage to stand up, reclaim their power, and turn pain into purpose. Don't let lies define you. Let your truth shine.